whispered through the banyan leaves, 1,000 lives in every breeze. Drums that pulse, they softly tease. Time folds the stories we. Echoes rise, they call us near. Through shadowed past, the path is clear. Blasian tales, the heart can hear. A world reborn in every tear.
The water felt heavy, like the weight of the world pressing me deeper into the abyss. My limbs thrashed, desperate to reach the surface, but the more I struggled, the farther away it seemed. Then, like a sinister veil being lifted, the water turned crimson, the deep red staining everything around me. My arms became numb, the pain gnawing through my body. I gasped, the choking sensation of water filling my lungs, blurring the line between life and death. And then stillness. My body stopped fighting, and I felt myself sinking, the darkness swallowing me whole. I closed my eyes, accepting what seemed inevitable. This was the end of the road for me. But suddenly, my eyes shot open and I sat upright. My heart raced, a wild, erratic drumbeat in my chest. "It was just a nightmare, Eliana," I whispered to myself, trying to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. But even as I said it, I knew better. It wasn't a nightmare, it was a memory. One I wished I could forget, but it had burned itself into my soul like a scar. The sterile smell of disinfectant brought me back to reality, grounding me in the present. I realized I was lying in a hospital bed, the harsh fluorescent lights casting sharp shadows on the walls. Slowly, I stared down at my hands and legs, the puzzle pieces of my life falling back into place. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and made my way to the bathroom. As I splashed cold water on my face, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My fingers traced the unfamiliar contours of my new face, one that had been crafted for me. "I have a new face, thanks to a certain someone," I whispered, a bitter smile curling on my lips. My original face had been beautiful, but this new one, this face of a stranger, was even more so. It was my perfect disguise, the mask I would wear as I slipped back into the world unnoticed. My enemies wouldn't see me coming, not until it was too late. "I will not spare any single one of them," I vowed, my voice hardening. I didn't just want to hurt them, I wanted to destroy them. I would make them so miserable that they would beg for death but be denied such mercy. I knew I had to be cautious, more so than ever before. I couldn't afford to fall victim to anyone's schemes again. No second betrayals, no second chances for those who had wronged me. I walked out of the bathroom and went to the window, the cold light of dawn spilling over the city below. My gaze hardened as I replayed my plans over and over in my mind, making sure every detail was perfect, every step accounted for. "No matter what, I will never trust anyone again," I whispered to myself. "I will never fall in love again, get attached to any man, or let anyone into my heart. I will build walls around me which no one will ever penetrate. From now on, I will rely only on myself." I had been given a second chance at life, and a face that could deceive even the closest of friends. How had I been so lucky to receive such an opportunity? "Ivy." I turned at the sound of a familiar voice, and then I saw him. Kim Hajun, the man who had deceived me into believing that he was my husband. My expression turned icy as I remembered the humiliation his family had put me through. Rail's slap, Jiwoo's and his mom's vindictive tantrums, and worse, the moment I had walked naked into Hajun's bathroom, offering myself to him, convinced I was his wife. The embarrassment of that moment still made my stomach churn. But then my anger faded, replaced by a strange sense of gratitude. How could I be furious with the man who had given me a second chance at life? Yes, he had used me, but he had never harmed me. He hadn't taken advantage of me when I was vulnerable, and he had given me an identity when I had none, even if it was a false one. He was not my enemy. If anything, he was my savior. I wanted to smile, to show him that I appreciated everything he had done for me, but the smile wouldn't come. My face felt too stiff, as though the ability to express such softness had died along with my old self. We stood in silence for what felt like forever, his eyes never leaving mine. I took a step toward him, but before I could say anything, Rail and her mother barged into the room, followed by Jaya. They paid no attention to Kim Hajun, treating him as if he were invisible. Rael stormed towards me, her eyes burning with fury. She raised her hand to slap me, just as she had done before, but this time I was ready. I caught her wrist midair, my grip firm. The memory of her previous slap flashed through my mind, and without hesitation, I delivered a punch that sent her sprawling onto the floor with a shriek, and a drop of blood falling from her nose. Her mother gasped in horror and charged at me as well. I caught her arm too, shoving her back. Jaya barely managed to catch her before she hit the floor. Through it all, Hajun didn't move a muscle. His eyes remained on me, but I saw the flash of surprise in them. He hadn't expected this from me, hadn't anticipated that I would fight back so fiercely. "No one raises their hand to me," I warned coldly, glaring at Rael and her mother. It was a fact that Rael was the first person to ever raise her hand to me. All my life, no one had dared to do that, not even my stepmother, as she knew the implication of committing such a crime. Hajun's mother shifted tactics, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. She turned to Hajun, clinging to his shirt like a lifeline. "How can you just stand there and let this happen, Hajun?" she wailed. "This girl is evil." She pushed Jiwoo down the stairs, causing her to miscarry. And now, Jiwoo has lost her womb because of her jealousy. Watching her bawl her eyes out, I sighed, unmoved by her drama. Hajun pried his mom's hands off his shirt and pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. Showing it to her, he said, "I got a DNA test done so you could see for yourself that the child wasn't mine." His mother, Rael, and Jaya stared at the paper in stunned silence. Hajun's next words landed like a bombshell. "And as for Jiwoo's womb, I had her undergo a hysterectomy." A shocked silence filled the room. I could hardly believe what I was hearing, even after everything I had been through. His mother's eyes widened with horror. "How could you be so cruel and play God in the life of such a young woman?" his mom barked. He scoffed, "Cruel? Jiwoo clearly knew there would be consequences when she threw all those accusations at me and tried to ruin my marriage. Do you have any idea how much she upset my wife? I warned her that she would be punished if the truth was revealed, but she was selfish until the very end. Going as far as throwing herself down the stairs to kill her unborn child and frame Ivy for it, just so her lies would not be exposed in 2 days, makes her unfit to ever carry a child in her womb. If you want justice for her, I suggest you take me to court." His mother stared at him in disbelief before her voice came out in a low hiss. "Even if the child wasn't yours, I'd have preferred Jiwoo as your wife over this woman." She glanced at me with venomous disdain. "You can still fix this. Jiwoo loves you, Hajun." Hajun smirked. "Are you suggesting I marry a woman who can't bear children? How interesting. I thought you wanted grandchildren." His mother was rendered speechless, her face twisting with helpless rage. Hajun turned to the rest of the group. "All of you leave. Ivy needs peace and quiet." His mom and sister glared at me before angrily leaving the room along with Jaya. The hatred their eyes held for me did not seem ordinary. There was something between the real Ivy and Hajun's family which he didn't know about, and frankly speaking, I couldn't care less about it. When they were gone, Hajun stepped closer. "Ivy, What city?" I interrupted. He looked confused. "What? Where am I?" I asked again. "What city?" "Chungwal, we're in Busan," he answered cautiously. I nodded, letting out a slow breath. "Good, then I can find my way home." Hajun's brows furrowed. "Home? Have you regained all your memories?" I nodded and began to walk out, but he held my hand and pulled me back. "Hold on." "Thank you very much for saving my life," I expressed. "Someday I will repay your kindness. For now, I have to leave." "Stay," he urged gently. There was a plea in his voice, one that I couldn't answer. His eyes were filled with emotions I didn't have the luxury to indulge in. I had a purpose now, something bigger than his request, something that burned inside me like a fire I couldn't extinguish. Seeing that I didn't want to stay, he added, "You have the face of my late fiancée now, and I know one of my family members murdered her. I just need you to stay for a little longer and play along until I find the culprit. Please." His words made me understand why he had lied to me from the beginning. "I can't stay," I said softly. "There is something important I must do. It is the only thing on my mind right now, and I cannot bring myself to do anything else until I have taken care of that. It is the reason I fought to stay alive, the reason why I came back. Hajun, I owe you my life. I promise I will do anything you want, even give my life up, but it can only happen after I've done what I need to do." "What is it?" he demanded. "Tell me." I shook my head. "I'm afraid I can't do that. The success of my mission depends on it. When the time comes, I will find you." He stared at me, searching my face for something, anything, that might convince me to stay. But he wouldn't find it. My resolve was unbreakable. "But Ivy—" "Goodbye, Hajan," I said, pulling my hand free and turning to leave. After taking a few steps, I stopped. I walked back to him, stood on my tippy toes, and kissed his cheek as I whispered, "My name is Eliana." Afterward, I walked out of the hospital without looking back. As I walked out of the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something behind, something crucial. It was an odd sensation, like a tiny voice whispering in my ear, urging me to stop, but I couldn't quite grasp why. Still, I kept moving forward, determined not to let the nagging feeling pull me back. Once outside, I paused. The cool air greeted me as I looked right, then left. A wave of confusion washed over me. I was lost. I had been to Chingual a few times for business, but the streets felt like a maze. I knew some landmarks but had no idea which road led where. I stood there, frozen, weighing my options before finally trusting my gut. I turned left and began walking, hoping it would lead me somewhere familiar. It was exhausting. With every step, frustration built inside me. My legs grew heavy, and the unfamiliar streets stretched on endlessly. After what felt like hours, I started to question whether I was even moving in the right direction. But with no money, my legs were the only way forward. I kept walking, despite the growing thirst in my throat and the ache spreading through my body. Finally, just as my legs threatened to give out, I spotted a familiar sight, a large shopping mall. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. The sun was setting, and I could feel the darkness creeping closer. I needed to move quickly. Once inside the mall, I found the jewelry section without much trouble. I slid off the round cut, diamond-studded ring Hajan had given me when he lied about being my husband at the hospital. It was the only reason I had been able to walk away from him without worrying about my survival. Good thing he didn't ask for his ring back. Still, I knew its true value. Being raised around wealth had its perks. I could easily appraise the shimmering diamond encircling my finger, and I estimated it was worth at least 20,000 won. The pawnshop manager's eyes lit up when I handed him the ring, but he quickly hid his excitement behind a calculated smirk. 8,000, he said flatly, though I knew he was aware it was worth far more. It didn't matter. It was enough to keep me moving forward. I took the money, a thick envelope that felt strangely heavy in my hands, and left the shop without a backward glance. First things first, a phone. After purchasing a basic model and slipping in a new SIM card, I booked a nearby hotel. It cost 3,000 a night, but I didn't care. I needed a place to rest, somewhere to catch my breath. Once inside the hotel room, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm the storm swirling inside me. I pulled out my new phone and sent a single, urgent message. SOS, help your little princess. Then I paced the room, anxiety clawing at my insides as I waited for a response. 10 long minutes passed before my phone rang. The sound startled me, and I answered it in a rush. Godfather, my voice trembled with relief as I spoke. There was a gasp on the other end. Princess, is that really you? You're alive. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I pushed them back. I'll explain everything when I see you, I said quickly. I need your help. I need a ride home and tools to protect myself. Will you help me, Godfather? His voice softened. Where are you? Chingual, I replied, feeling a flicker of hope. There was a brief pause, and then he asked, Can you be at the international airport by 10 tomorrow? I'll be there, I promised. I'll be wearing red. He chuckled, a sound that carried warmth and familiarity through the phone. Princess, I haven't seen you in 3 years, but I'd recognize you anywhere. I sighed, a mixture of exhaustion and relief washing over me. Well, we'll see tomorrow. Good night, Godfather, and please be discreet. Always, he assured me. Good night, Princess. After the call ended, I felt a little lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I left the hotel room to buy a few more essentials, some clothes, toiletries, anything I might need for the journey ahead. When I returned, I ordered dinner and ate quickly. The exhaustion that had been hovering over me began to fade, but my mind was still restless. I decided to take a bath. Hopping the warm water would soothe my aching body and calm my mind. As I sank into the tub, closing my eyes, I felt a brief moment of peace. But that peace was quickly shattered by an unwelcome memory. Hajan's touch, his lips on my skin, the way he made me feel when he touched me. My eyes shot open, and I bolted upright in the tub, water splashing around me. I couldn't allow myself to think of him like that. I wrapped myself in a towel and threw myself onto the bed, willing sleep to come. But it didn't. Thoughts of revenge danced in my mind, visions of Yeren and Jiho crumbling beneath the weight of my wrath. Ironically, when I finally began to feel sleepy, it was because my mind once again drifted to Hajan, his voice speaking softly to me as he laid on the bed with his gaze on me. He moved closer, kissing and pulling me into his arms, and suddenly I felt all my troubles melt away. In his arms, I felt safe and protected until I finally fell asleep. When I awoke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky. I must have slept deeply, my body recovering from the stress of the previous day. After a quick trip to the bathroom, I dressed in black jeans and a crop top, covering myself with a red jacket and pulling the hood over my head. Red sneakers completed the outfit. I ordered breakfast, checked out of the hotel at 9, and hailed a cab to the airport. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone rang again. "Where are you?" Kim Dong-wook's voice was steady, calm. "I'm here." I scanned the area until I spotted him, standing near his aircraft, surrounded by his bodyguards. Relief surged through me as I ran toward him, my pulse quickening with every step. But just as I approached, I stopped when I noticed his face darkening. He frowned, his eyes narrowing as my hood slipped off. He turned away, heading back toward the plane. "Godfather," I called out, desperation edging into my voice. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his tone cold and suspicious. His bodyguards tensed, their hands hovering near their weapons. I took a shaky step closer, my voice trembling. "It's me. I'm your little girl, your princess, Eliana." His eyes scanned me, searching for the truth in my words. The air around us was thick with tension, and I could feel every heartbeat thundering in my chest. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure you're subscribed to Blasian Folktales. That way, you won't miss the next episode or the twist that's coming. We post new Blasian Folktales and series episodes, and subscribing keeps you locked in for every reveal, every secret, and every moment that makes these stories special. It only takes a second. Tap subscribe, turn on the bell, and you're good to go. All right, no more interruptions. Let's jump right back into the story. Mr. Kim paused, his eyes lingering on me, searching for something familiar. His voice was skeptical, almost wounded. "How can I believe you're my little princess when you look nothing like her?" My heart pounded, but I kept moving toward him, my hands raised in surrender. "Do you remember when I was 13? I asked gently, hoping the memories would connect us again. I took another step closer, speaking softly. "Dad brought me to you for a 3-month holiday. You said I was too weak, too delicate. You wanted me to be stronger, to learn how to shoot, how to defend myself. But Dad..." He couldn't bear the thought of me getting hurt. He said I didn't need to shoot a gun because my bodyguards would always be there. Mr. Kim's eyes softened, the tension in his face easing as he listened. "I remember you were upset," I continued. "You said you didn't want me to grow up helpless. I couldn't stand the two of you fighting, so I lied. I told Dad that I wanted to learn, that it was my idea. He gave in, and you taught me everything. By the end of that summer, I could shoot, I could defend myself. You told me those skills would come in handy one day." My voice trembled as I finished, the weight of my words hanging in the air. "You were right. Godfather, I've been betrayed by everyone I trusted. Now I only have you." Tears filled his eyes, and in an instant, he closed the distance between us. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me into a warm, familiar embrace. "My princess," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He kissed my forehead gently, like he used to when I was a child. For a moment, it felt like everything was okay, like I was safe again. He still had the strength I remembered, even at 80. His embrace was as strong as ever, his presence as steady as a rock. "Come," he said after a moment, releasing me. "Let's go." We boarded the plane together, heading toward Seoul. The hum of the engine filled the silence, but inside me, the storm raged on. As we flew, I told him everything. How the people I trusted had turned on me, how I had been left to suffer alone. He listened, his eyes heavy with sorrow, but his grip on my hand never loosened. When I finished, he spoke quietly. "You suffered so much," he said, his voice gentle but strong. "What do you want to do now?" I met his gaze, my answer clear and firm. "I want revenge." A smile spread across his face, proud, almost amused. "That's my girl," he said. He reached down and opened a briefcase beside him. Inside, neatly arranged, were guns and ammunition. "I brought what you asked for." The sight of the weapons made my stomach turn, but I knew they were necessary. Mr. Kim had loved my father like he was his son, and his love for me was fierce. But I didn't want to drag him any deeper into this fight than he already was. "Why didn't you call me when you were arrested?" he asked suddenly, his voice tinged with frustration. I sighed, leaning back in my seat. I thought it was a simple misunderstanding. I believed my innocence would be proven, that everything would sort itself out. When I realized it was all part of their plan, it was too late. I had no way of reaching you from the island prison. No phone calls were allowed, only visitors and letters. Without my phone, sending an SOS message was the only way I could reach you, and that wasn't possible. Mr. Kim nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "By the time word of your imprisonment got to me, you had already been declared dead." His voice cracked, and the pain in his eyes made my heart ache. "I mourned and even held a burial for you. I didn't believe a word of what was said about you. You were kind to a fault, and I always feared it would be your undoing." "It almost was," I whispered. "But I've learned. I won't let it happen again." Mr. Kim smiled. "Teaching you how to defend yourself and shoot a gun was in hopes that you would become a little hard, but it wasn't your nature. However, you seem to have matured, and that makes me happy. Now, how else can I help you in this revenge of yours?" "There's something else," I said, my voice more steady now. "When I was in prison, I had a visitor. Can you change their face and identity in the records?" His brow furrowed in thought. "Who do you want this person to be?" "Ivy," I replied. "The one who truly has this face I'm carrying. That's what I need the records to show." Mr. Kim nodded without hesitation. "Consider it done. What else?" A wave of relief washed over me. I wanted to tell him that I needed a lawyer who could not be bribed or intimidated, but I stopped short of asking for more. He had already done so much for me. "I have a house on the outskirts of the city," I told him. "The last thing you can do for me is drop me off there." He frowned, concern etched in his features. "Are you sure? Do you need bodyguards? I don't like the idea of you being on your own." I shook my head. "I can take care of myself. Don't worry, Godfather, I won't make the same mistakes again." 7 hours later, I stood outside my father's old house, waving as Mr. Kim's car disappeared into the distance. The house felt like a relic of the past, filled with memories of my father. It had always been his retreat, a place of quiet and solitude. Now it was mine. I spent the next few hours in a daze. I ate a small meal, washed up, and rested. But as night fell, I felt the pull of my mission again. I opened the briefcase and pulled out a shotgun. Its weight felt strange in my hands, but I loaded it with steady determination, tucking it carefully into the back of my pants. There was something I needed from my old house, something I couldn't wait until morning to retrieve. But as I stepped outside, I realized with a sinking heart that I didn't have a car and no money to buy one. Biting my lip, I considered asking one of my old business contacts for help. They would probably offer me a car without hesitation if they knew who I really was. But I wanted to keep my circle small, tight, safer that way. So instead, I hailed a luxury cab, ignoring the unease in my stomach as I settled into the backseat. When I arrived in front of my old home, the one I had shared with Jiho, I paid the driver in cash and stepped out. The sight of the place made my chest tighten. Inside, I knew Yeren was living with him. No guilt, no shame. It didn't matter anyway. I wasn't there for an apology. I took a deep breath, my heart racing with anticipation and fury as I approached the front door. My voice was soft, but the words were filled with steel. "I'm back," I whispered. "Cheaters." I approached the door and typed in the passcode, my fingers moving quickly, more out of habit than anything else. "Invalid passcode." The words flashed brightly on the screen, and a cold wave of realization washed over me. Jiho had changed the passcode. I wasn't surprised, though. He was the only other person who knew how to alter the code, and this confirmed everything. He was living here, in my house, with her. Taking a steadying breath, I reset the passcode. Since the system was still tied to my fingerprint, that was something Jiho couldn't change without me. The door unlocked with a soft click. I cracked it open just enough to peek inside. The living room was eerily silent, empty, but the stillness was misleading. The CCTV camera was positioned perfectly to capture my entrance, just as I had designed it when I lived here. I cursed it under my breath, regretting the meticulousness I once prided myself on. The camera was a problem, but so were the changes. The living room was almost unrecognizable, with its new furniture in colors I loathed. Everything that reflected me had been erased. My photos, my touch gone. Instead, Yaren's pictures littered the walls, her smile wide and bright, mocking me from every angle. I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me. But almost immediately, the deafening wail of an alarm exploded through the house. I flinched, the noise rattling my nerves. "Damn it!" I hissed, my mind racing. The siren blared louder and louder, and I knew I only had seconds before someone came running. This wasn't part of the plan. I hadn't thought it through, letting my emotions drive me there. The rapid sound of footsteps pounded closer. Without hesitation, I bolted to the left, diving into hiding. Whoever was coming, I couldn't let them catch me. If they checked the security footage and saw me, my plans would be ruined. I hadn't considered how reckless I was being by showing up there without definite plans. But now it was too late to turn back. I couldn't stop. I had to disable the security system and erase any trace of me. Despite the changes, I knew the house like the back of my hand. Even in the dark, I could navigate it without stumbling. Every corner, every hallway was burned into my memory, and that familiarity gave me a good idea. I heard the footsteps stop, just outside the living room. "Who's there?" Jiho's voice cut through the silence like a knife, and my heart leapt into my throat. Instinctively, I reached for my gun, my fingers brushing the cool metal. But I hesitated. I wasn't ready to use it, not yet. I didn't know how many people were in the house or what I was truly up against. The footsteps resumed, and they were heading straight for me. Quickly, I tucked the gun back into my jacket, dropped to my hands and knees, and crawled silently across the floor. My muscles ached from the tension, but I pushed through it, inching forward until I spotted the CCTV room. I knew Jiho would check the security footage. If I didn't get there before him, everything would unravel. Peeking over the edge of the couch, I saw him standing near the exit door, his head tilted, eyes scanning the house for any sign of movement. He hadn't noticed me yet. This was my chance. I slipped out from behind the couch where I hid and crept toward the door, hoping the passcode hadn't been changed. My fingers shook as I typed in the familiar code. The door clicked open, and I stepped inside, adrenaline pumping through my veins. "You!" Jiho's voice roared behind me. I spun around to see him charging toward the door. There was no time to think. I slammed my hand down on the control switch, plunging the house into total darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Neither of us could see a thing. I pressed my back against the wall, listening for his footsteps, my breath held tight in my chest. Outside the door, his footsteps stopped. I carefully opened the door, letting it hang ajar as I hugged the wall. In the dark, I heard Jiho moving away. Quietly, I followed him, my steps as light as possible. He crouched behind a couch, the dim glow of his phone casting a faint light on his face. His hands trembled as he dialed. 112, what's your emergency? A female dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. There's an intruder in my house, and... He cut off abruptly, sensing me before I could make my move. He stood up quickly, trying to attack, but I was faster. My gun was already pressed into his ribs before he could get another word out. Not another word, I whispered harshly. He froze, his body trembling. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Slowly, he raised his hands in surrender. "Please, don't hurt me. Take whatever you want. I won't stop you. Just don't hurt me," he begged, his voice shaking. The corners of my lips curled into a cold smile. "Turn around," I ordered, disguising my voice. "Unless you want a bullet in your belly." Without hesitation, he obeyed, turning his back to me. I saw the dark stain spreading down his pants and sneered. How had I ever found him attractive? What a coward. With a swift movement, I struck the back of his head with the butt of my gun. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. I didn't waste a second. Grabbing my phone, I switched on the flashlight and sprinted back to the CCTV room. I deleted the footage of my entrance, making sure there was no trace left of me. Then I took the stairs 2 at a time, heading straight for my old bedroom. I had no time to waste. The police would be there any minute. The door to my bedroom was still intact, and I kicked it open without hesitation. Inside, Yaren stirred from sleep, her voice groggy with confusion. "Baby, why is it so dark?" She rubbed her eyes, slowly sitting up in bed, but she didn't get a chance to say anything else. I shone my light directly in her face, blinding her, and then lunged forward, landing a solid punch squarely on her nose. She cried out, falling back against the pillows, dazed. Ignoring her, I moved to the safe. There were 4 safes in the room, but only one mattered to me. The others were filled with jewelry and money, but the one I cared about contained something far more valuable. Hidden inside an old teddy bear was a secret no one else knew about. Jiho never suspected it. He thought it was just a childhood keepsake, but my father had gifted it to me. As I retrieved the bear, I heard movement behind me. Yeren was on her feet again, holding a rod. She swung at me, but I dodged, dropping the teddy in the process. My gun was in my hand in an instant, and I fired a warning shot that whizzed past her ear, hitting the door behind her. She froze, collapsing to the floor in tears. "Please, I'm sorry, don't kill me," she sobbed, her voice barely audible through her fear. I scoffed, shining the light in her face. Blood dripped from her nose, mixing with her tears as she sat trembling on the floor. Pathetic. She was just as weak as Jiho. The sound of police sirens in the distance snapped me back to reality. I needed to leave now. I hit her across the head with the gun, knocking her out cold, grabbed the teddy, and dashed out of the room. I didn't stop until I reached the front door. My phone's light guided me through the darkness as I unlocked the door and slipped outside. The sirens were deafening now, the flashing lights growing closer. There was no time to waste. I took off running in the opposite direction, every muscle in my body screaming for relief, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I couldn't let them catch me. My lungs burned as I pushed forward, the sound of tires screeching behind me making my heart race even faster. Suddenly, a car pulled up beside me. My pulse quickened, thinking it was the cops. But then a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Get in, baby." I skidded to a stop, my breath catching in my throat. I turned to the car, barely believing my eyes. Hajan.
Eliana, so that was her name. The moment it escaped my lips, I felt a deep emptiness spread through my chest, like a part of me had suddenly vanished. Watching her walk away left me hollow, and with each step she took, I felt as though my purpose was fading. Before I knew it, I found myself following her. I trailed her quietly, careful not to draw attention. After all, she had already said goodbye. I doubted she'd appreciate knowing I was still there, lurking in the background like a shadow she couldn't shake. She walked slowly, almost painfully so. I could tell she hadn't fully recovered, her steps heavy with fatigue. Concerned, I hurried back to the hospital and grabbed my car, using it to discreetly follow her. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I watched her struggle forward, weak but determined. She eventually entered a mall, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was doing. She had no money on her. What was she after? My curiosity piqued. Who was this woman? I stayed in my car, keeping a safe distance until she finally came out and disappeared into a hotel. I made a few calls and hired someone to take over, someone who could observe from afar and update me on her every move. While I waited, I decided I needed more information. I sought out an expert, someone who could dig up anything and everything about her. I gave the name Eliana, but I narrowed the search, someone in her early 20s, once incarcerated in the Chinggual Island prison, who had taken a bullet while trying to escape. Surprisingly, a match appeared. A face appeared on my screen, the youngest billionaire in Seoul, a woman who was not only wealthy but carried a reputation that both fascinated and baffled me. One look at her photo and I knew it was her. It suddenly made sense, her air of authority, the way she carried herself even in moments of vulnerability. She was young, only 20, and yet she was burdened with more than most people could bear. But the information I found conflicted with the woman I had met. How could someone so young, described as generous and kind, be convicted of murder? She was said to have killed her husband in cold blood, driven by jealousy, they claimed. Yet, if she was as powerful as the reports indicated, why would she resort to such a brutal act? With her wealth, she could have easily covered up any wrongdoing. Why did everything unravel so terribly for her? Nothing added up, but her story, tragic and twisted, gave me new insight. The flashes she'd spoken of, the memories of being a bride, made sense now. I sighed, sinking deeper into confusion. If she truly was a murderer, I wanted no part of her world. More than that, I couldn't bear the thought of her wearing the face of Ivy, the woman who had meant everything to me. But what if she was innocent? The truth gnawed at me. Too often, innocent people were framed, condemned for crimes they didn't commit. I recalled the look in her eyes when she spoke of having a mission, a fierce, wounded gaze like that of a lioness ready to reclaim her life. I knew I had to find out more about her. The answers wouldn't come easy, but I couldn't walk away now. Returning to my private house, my mind whirled with emotions. That night, sleep did little to offer me peace. I dreamed of her, of Eliana in my bed, her body pressed against mine as we made love but with Ivy's face. The dream felt so vivid, so real that when I awoke, my body ached with longing and I discovered I had experienced a wet dream. Embarrassed, I cursed under my breath. I hadn't had a wet dream since I was 16. After washing up, my thoughts returned to Eliana. The hollow ache in my chest deepened with the thought of never seeing her again. Despite everything, despite knowing she wasn't Ivy, I didn't want her to be harmed. Whatever her plans were, they had to be dangerous. She was alone in this, and whether she wanted it or not, she needed help. I needed to protect her. In the end, I needed her help to uncover the truth behind Ivy's death. The decision had already been made in my heart. A few calls later, I had my businesses placed in the hands of my trusted assistant. More information on Eliana trickled in from the expert I had consulted, each piece only raising more questions. I knew she'd be heading back to Seoul, and I knew I needed to be there when she arrived. My pilots were summoned, and soon I'd be on my way to Seoul. In the meantime, the man I hired would keep an eye on her, ready to assist whenever she decided to return. I'd use the time to dig deeper into her past, her crime, her trial, her fall from grace. I wasn't sure what I would find, but one thing was certain. I couldn't turn away from her now. Things didn't turn out the way I hoped, though. 10 minutes after breakfast, I got a call. Eliana was heading to the airport. Tossing my breakfast aside, I grabbed my jacket and rushed out the door. When I arrived, I spotted her almost immediately. But what I saw wasn't what I expected. She wasn't alone. She was with a man I recognized, Kim Dong-wook. We had crossed paths in business over the years. The way he hugged her, kissed her, their relationship was certainly deep. Rumors swirled around Dong-wook, whispers that he had deep ties to the mafia, though I'd never confirmed them. But seeing him with Eliana like this made my stomach churn. Could it be true? Was she entangled in this darkness? Could she really be a murderer, trained by a man like Dong-wook? I watched them until their plane took off. Then, without wasting a moment, I made some calls. Seoul, that's where they were headed. Lucky for me, I had already prepared for this. My bags were packed and my flight was ready. After hours in the air, I touched down in Seoul, the city cold and unfamiliar. It wasn't long before I spotted Eliana again. She was slipping into a jeep, with Dong-wook and his men trailing behind in 3 black cars. My gut twisted. What was she doing with these people? Dismissing my driver, I got behind the wheel myself, keeping a safe distance as I followed them to a quiet apartment on the outskirts of the city. I parked far enough away to remain unnoticed, watching her say goodbye to Dong-wook. Relief flooded me when she entered the apartment alone, but questions gnawed at my mind. Why was she here? Why was she staying in such an isolated place when she wasn't fully recovered? It didn't make sense. Hours passed. I watched her apartment through my binoculars, trying to decide what to do. Exhaustion tugged at me, but the thought of leaving her alone made me restless. Finally, I made up my mind. I'd reveal myself to her. It was time to confront Eliana. But just as I opened the car door, a luxury cab pulled up outside her apartment. She climbed into it without a second thought. I cursed under my breath and quickly got back in my car, following them to an estate that felt eerily familiar. I'd seen the name in my research on her. This must have been her home before everything fell apart. She paid the driver and slipped inside, disappearing into the house. Leaning back in my seat, I sighed. "Busy night, Eliana," I muttered under my breath. But something didn't sit right. A moment later, the lights outside the house went off. Only her place was shrouded in darkness. The rest of the estate remained lit. Alarm bells rang in my head. She must have done something. Something wasn't right. I couldn't stay in the car any longer. I had to make sure she was okay. I approached the door cautiously, my heart pounding harder with every step. Then, bang, a gunshot echoed through the night. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was to call out to her, but then I heard sirens in the distance. The police were coming. I had no choice but to leave. If Eliana was hurt, the police would save her. If not, well, she was smart enough to find her way out of tight situations. I had to trust she had an exit plan. I sprinted back to my car and sped away, far enough to stay out of sight, but close enough to keep watch with my binoculars. The sirens grew louder, but before the police could reach the house, I saw her. Eliana emerged, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. She paused for a moment, listening to the approaching sirens, calculating her next move. Then, without a car, she started running in the opposite direction. She wouldn't make it far on foot, not with the police closing in. I couldn't let her get caught. I floored the gas pedal, racing toward her. As I pulled up beside her, I pushed open the passenger door. "Get in, baby," I said, my voice steady, despite the chaos around us. She froze at the sound of my voice, her head whipping around to face me. Her eyes widened in shock. "Hajun." But there was no time for questions. Without hesitation, she jumped into the car, slamming the door shut as I sped away into the night.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like, share and comment below.